Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to have you here for our presentation today. I know the attendees are still filing in from the waiting room, but our topic presentation today is LSVT Loud for Kids, helping children find their voice. The faculty for today include myself. I'm Cynthia Fox. I am a speech language pathologist. I am CEO and co-founder of LSVT Global, which is hosting this webinar. And I'm also a faculty for LSVT Loud and LSVT Big training and certification courses. I am joined by my colleague, Dr. Jessica Galgano. She is an expert clinician and faculty for LSVT Loud, and she also owns and operates her own private practice both in New York City and Los Angeles. And we'll hear from Jessica a little bit later in this presentation. Our full biographies are here for your information, and our disclosures include the following. Non-financial, we have a relationship that includes a preference for LSVT Loud and LSVT Big as treatment techniques. In terms of a financial relationship, myself, I am an employee of and receive lecture honorarium and have ownership interest in LSVT Global. And Jessica is a consultant for and receives lecture honorarium from LSVT Global. A few quick logistics. All of you are in the webinar. Your microphones are muted. You can ask questions in the question panel, or you can also place information in the chat. The questions will be addressed at the end, but if you're having any technical issues, you can put them in the chat and we'll monitor that and answer them as we go. The handouts and survey will both be coming tomorrow. So you will get a handout of all of the slides. The survey for filling out about the webinar will come in a post-webinar email that you will receive tomorrow. So we were unable to get those uploaded prior to the start of the webinar, but if you're viewing this live, you will have access to that. So please know that to be true. In terms of continuing education activity, this webinar is not ASHA or state registered for CEUs for speech, physical, and occupational therapy professionals. However, it can be used for self-reported CEU credit as a non-registered, non-pre-approved activity. If you're viewing it live, just email webinars@LSVT Global to request that certificate after completing the webinar. And if you're viewing this on demand, you'll complete a survey at the conclusion of the webinar, and that survey link can be found below the webinar description. Note that licensing requirements for CEU varies by state, so check with those requirements, and attendance for the full hour is required to earn the certificate. What will we cover today? Well, our goals are to summarize the serendipitous events that led to the application of LSVT Loud in children with cerebral palsy and other conditions. We will highlight the evidence supporting LSVT Loud for children with motor speech disorders, identify LSVT Loud treatment structure, including daily exercises and the speech hierarchy, and then examine challenges and solutions for successful clinical implementation of this treatment for pediatric populations. First of all, there may be some of you out there who are completely unfamiliar with LSVT Loud. What is it? LSVT Loud, or Lee-Silverman voice treatment, is an effective speech treatment initially developed for people with Parkinson's. And it was named for Mrs. Lee Silverman, who you see pictured here, who was a woman living with Parkinson's. She was one of the first people to receive the LSVT Loud treatment. The treatment is intensive, high-effort voice treatment. It consists of 4 consecutive days a week for 4 weeks in a row. So 16 sessions of speech treatment in 1 month's time. These are 60-minute sessions. It's individual, not group therapy. There's daily homework and carryover exercises, and the treatment is delivered by speech therapists who've been specially certified in LSVT LOUD. It is the only speech treatment for people with Parkinson's with strong evidence. And there's 30 or more years of NIH funded research and over 200 peer reviewed publications led by the principal investigator and developer of LSVT LOUD, Dr. Lorraine Ramick. So, how did we get from this very robust, very evidence based treatment for people with Parkinson's to an application to pediatrics? Well, the story is a bit serendipitous, and it came about because I was working at the University of Arizona. I was actually back as a PhD student, and the laboratory I was in was the Hoyt-Hickson lab, and it focused on respiration and respiration for speech. A colleague, Dr. Carol Bullock, physiologist, and she was working in that laboratory on respiratory measures, looking at children with and without cerebral palsy and how they develop speech breathing patterns, and infants at risk for cerebral palsy. As happens in shared laboratories, we have great discussions, we share research, we get feedback from each other. And Dr. Bullock approached me and said, many of the children I work with cerebral palsy, they have soft voices like people with Parkinson's. They have breathy voices. They have reduced respiratory support. What do you think about LSVT loud for these kids? And at that time, had absolutely no idea if it would be helpful, if it would work. So we just had this question, what if? And then one day, Dr. Bullock comes to me. She says, I think I have the perfect child for us to try. He was 3 years, 11 months old male, cerebral palsy of the dyskinetic type, all 4 limbs involved. And his mother described his speech as throaty and strained, limited respiratory support, breathy sometimes, variability in vocal loudness, and severely reduced speech intelligibility. So we just dove in, had no idea what to expect, but we did stimulability testing, liked what we saw, and so decided to proceed and try LSVT loud. This is a pre-treatment clip of him saying the phrase, I don't know. You see a microphone signal on top and a spectrogram of the speech on the bottom, and we'll hear how he sounds pre-treatment. And again. And then immediately after treatment, saying the same phrase. I don't know. I don't know. So we heard many changes similar to what we hear in our adults with Parkinson's. Improved stability of the voice, improved vocal loudness, not so breathy, not so strangled. His mother reported increased frequency of speaking, that he, quote, understands using his voice and what that means, and had increased confidence with speaking as well. So, based on that case study, we really got motivated and we said, well, let's dig in deeper. Let's think through this rationale and what our next steps in terms of research should be. Common communication themes we found from child and parent interviews really highlight what we know inherently communication is important. But these children want to be socially accepted. So, their first choice often is to use oral communication. They continue to communicate orally, even in the absence of success. They can be extremely frustrated when peers or adults fail to wait to understand the message and, in some cases, simply walk away. And so there is a great need. So let's look at the essential concepts of LSVT loud treatment. The target is vocal loudness, the mode of delivery, intensive and high effort, and this concept of calibration, which addresses generalization outside the treatment room. And how can these Parkinson treatment concepts apply to a pediatric population? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, with LSVT Loud, we're really targeting the voice. And that would be the voice and respiratory system. They work in concert, but maybe more of that system as opposed to articulation and specific speech sounds. What we see here are different dysarthria types. So these are different types of motor speech dysarthric categories. And where we started was hypokinetic with Parkinson disease. Other types of dysarthria, spastic, ataxic, flaccid, hyperkinetic, mixed, with a range of different underlying etiologies. Yet, if you look at the voice component for every type of dysarthria, there are elements of the voice that are involved. Reduced loudness, breathy voice, variability in loudness, sometimes too soft, sometimes too loud, monotone, harsh, strangled voice quality. So we can think about using voice as a target of treatment in these dysarthrias, potentially as a point of entry, a place to start. It doesn't mean it's the only treatment they need, but it might be a good starting point. We also know that in LSVT loud, although our target is vocal loudness, that effort can cross over and we have positive effects in things like breath support, mouth opening, intonation, articulation, rate, naturalness, and more. So with one single focus of the treatment, healthy vocal loudness, we can get a nice spread of effects. In terms of mode of delivery, it's intensive and high effort. So I mentioned the protocol for the adults, 16 sessions in 1 month, 1 hour individual treatment sessions. We use the exact same protocol in our pediatric populations. And it incorporates multiple principles that drive neuroplasticity. And so we have intensity, complexity, repetition, saliency, and specificity. And then there's this concept of calibration. So, calibration addresses barriers to generalization of voice into daily living. For our people with Parkinson disease, this was very specific in that they have a mismatch in terms of their perception of their speech, which they feel is normal, but others perceive as too soft. And that when we get them louder, it feels too loud to the person with Parkinson's, but others perceive it as normal. So through treatment, we have to recalibrate their perception of normal effort and loudness in order to get that voice to walk out the door. Pediatric populations, it may be different, but there are still barriers to generalization. There may be sensory disorders. They do have to learn a new effort for good speech. There may be social stigma associated with communications. And in some cases, there may be cognitive challenges, delayed expressive and receptive language, abstract reasoning. So while our focus, our underlying issues with calibration may be different, it's so important to focus so that at the end of treatment, the child automatically uses improved voice in daily living, and the improved voice lasts over time. And we do this by incorporating saliency, functional phrases, a progressive hierarchy, and carryover exercises. So it really focuses on function. And you'll see some specific examples of this in a moment. So let's talk a little bit about the research. You'll have links that you can explore the full research data. I just want to give you a few highlights. We initially completed phase 1 treatment research, which was the discovery level. And then we moved to phase 2 treatment research, which explored more the dimensions of the therapeutic effect. So in our phase 1 studies, we had our first group were 5 children with cerebral palsy, 5 to 7 years old, in a single subject, multiple baseline design. We also included or completed a study with 9 children with Down syndrome, ages 5 to 8. Again, a single subject, multiple baseline design. In those studies, we looked at parent ratings, listener perception, acoustic measures of speech, so things related to loudness, pitch, and looked to determine, do we see a therapeutic effect? And at the end of those studies, our outcome was yes, we do. That led us to our phase 2 small group designs, where we included 2 additional groups of children with cerebral palsy. The first group were children 6 to 10 years old, and we also had a control group of children without cerebral palsy. And then we had a group of 9 children a little bit older, so 8 to 16 years old. We included the same measures of our phase 1 work, but added physiological measures and neuroimaging measures, and also concluded, yes, there's a therapeutic effect. I'll share just a few samples of some of those research outcomes. This is looking at acoustic measures of loudness, so decibels of sound pressure level. The higher up, the louder the voice. In black, we have the children with cerebral palsy. In yellow, the control group. We have pre, immediately post, and 12-week follow-up. And what we can see on the whole is the children with cerebral palsy on phrases were softer than those without. And we had a statistically significant increase in vocal loudness immediately following treatment that was maintained at 12 weeks. This is a similar type of look at acoustic measures, decibels of sound pressure level, in the group of children with Down syndrome. In this case, they were describing a picture. Black is pre-treatment, yellow is post, and we see that statistically significant increase in loudness. So let's hear a child with Down syndrome say the phrase, "I need help," pre-treatment.
I need help. I need help.
And immediately post.
I need help. I need help.
So similar to the child with cerebral palsy. These were parent perceptions from the group of children with cerebral palsy, and we had changes in things we would expect, like perception of loudness, but we also saw these communication features. So starting conversations more, less frustrated with talking, and more natural type of speech. So this is another example of a child with cerebral palsy. You'll hear 3 repetitions of a phrase pre-treatment and then 3 repetitions of that phrase post-treatment.
Pair 6, sample A.
The blue spot is on the key. The blue spot is on the key. The blue spot is on the key.
Sample B.
The blue spot is on the key. The blue spot is on the key. The blue spot is on the key.
Once again, I think you can hear some of those changes in loudness, in speech articulation, in clarity that we find in some of these children after LSVT LOUD and after 1 month, 16 sessions of speech treatment. Now, Dr. Bullock took the investigation to a whole nother level, including physiological and neurological measurements. So chest wall EMG, respiratrace, looking at speech breathing patterns pre and post treatment, and even neural imaging. So looking at both white fiber tract integrity and functional MRI. And I don't have time in the scope of this presentation to go through those data, but we did see some positive neurobiological changes that complemented the therapeutic effect, physiological effects. So all of this together supports and justifies considering use of LSVT LOUD in select children with cerebral palsy and Down syndrome with potential application to other pediatric populations. And we also know that maintenance of the practice is key to long-term success. So let's talk a little bit now about what does the treatment look like. Again, if you're unfamiliar with LSVT LOUD, this is the layout of a treatment session for anybody, adult, a child, Parkinson's, stroke, cerebral palsy, ataxia, Down syndrome. The first half of the session is spent on 3 daily exercises, multiple repetitions, and often in the children, we do many more than the minimum amount of 15. Then we take the voice that we rescale in this first half and we train it systematically into functional speech. So we have a progressive hierarchy, we have daily homework practice, and daily carryover exercises. And within this protocol, all the material is personalized. So we're focusing on each child's individual communication goals, their individual functional phrases, the reading or speaking material that's exciting and interesting to them, and every carryover exercise is individualized to the child. So we have a protocol, but a lot of personalization within it. The first exercise is a long sustained ah. So holding ah for as long as you can with healthy vocal loudness. Now the goal is to use this to facilitate good loudness that we then train into speech. So the goal of therapy is not to hold a long ah at the end of 16 session, but it's to be able to use that louder voice into conversational speech. So let's take a look of a video of a young girl, Katie. I am going to first play her audio sample of her voice before we started treatment. So this is her pre-treatment voice saying the phrase, "Bye, Bobby, a puppy," 3 times.
Bye, Bobby, a puppy. Bye, Bobby, a puppy. Bye, Bobby, a puppy.
Now, these treatment clips that I'll show you are in week 4 of treatment. So she's almost finished. So you can hear how her voice has changed. And this is the long ah exercise. Oh, perfect, Miss Katie. So what we're going to do is you're going to give me a nice big ah. Whoa! What did you get?
I got 953.
Good talking. Okay, so the goal again of this exercise over time is to improve respiratory vocal support. And of course, what I'm listening to as a therapist is at the end of the when I ask her to say this, the time, does she carry that good loudness into her speech? Oh, perfect.
Bye,
The next exercise are high ahs and low ahs, and these are designed to help learn to modulate the voice and improve intonation. So let's take a look at Katie doing this exercise. Woo! You want to watch it again?
Yes.
Okay. We'll put it here and then I bet we both can see it. Okay. Excellent job, Miss Katie. How does that feel? Can you feel it? Sit up big and tall and do it again. Good. Do you think you can hold it longer down low?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Good job. Should we try it again? Okay, and one thing to keep in mind, each of these vocal exercises, we do a minimum of 15 repetitions every day. Sometimes, again, it might be 20 to 30, depending upon how long the child can hold the duration. So it's lots of vocal exercise and practice. The third daily exercise are what we call functional phrases. So the child, and sometimes with the help of the family, comes up with 10 phrases or sentences that they say absolutely every day. Then we're going to practice these a minimum of 5 times every day. And this is the first step in generalizing the voice rescaling from the long ahs and the high and low ahs into functional speech. The goal of these 10 phrases is that because they say them every day, it becomes a reminder or a hook or a cue to remember to use their loud voice. So the mental sticky note of thinking loud. So here's Katie reading her functional phrases.
Are you ready with your big, beautiful voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, this is Katie.
Perfect.
Good morning. Stop it. Okay. Yes, please.
Don't forget to breathe.
Mom, Dad, come in here. Can I wake up? Stacy, thank you. Excuse me.
Okay, what if they didn't hear?
Excuse me.
Good. All right.
Okay, so you could tell by week 4, I didn't have to give her much of a cue, like, what are you going to do if they didn't hear you? And she immediately knew what to do, which was to put in more loudness and effort. Now, if children are unable to read, that's not a problem. We would simply do this exercise through repetition versus reading. All right, those 3 exercises make up the first 30 minutes of the session. The second 30 minutes are spent on a speech hierarchy. So we're starting, for example, from single words to 2-word phrases to 3-word to sentences to reading to conversation, gradually building up their ability to use healthy vocal loudness in daily communication. And even if they never get past maybe 3-word phrases, we go from more structured activities to more conversational at the end of the 16 sessions. And as always, we're building in their individual long-term communication goals. So in this case, Katie is looking at a picture and she's describing what it is so that her mother, who's in the room with us, has to guess what she's talking about.
All right, now with your ah, let me hear another little ah. Go ah, ah. Good with that voice. Explain what that is.
This is something you cook with. And it has different buttons that you can push.
Oh, try that again.
It has different buttons that you can push.
Good.
Microwave.
No.
No. Stove.
Yes.
Woo! Good.
So all of the activities that we would do in treatment, those functional phrases, the speaking activities, the reading activities, children who are younger will have more play-based activities, are personalized to what they are interested in, what motivates them. Now back to calibration. This is really focusing on how do we generalize this voice outside of the treatment room. We don't want it just to be something the child does when they're in speech therapy and then walks out the door and goes back to the softer voice. So with that, we really work on intrinsic rewards. How does that feel? How does that sound? When you use that voice, people will understand you. And so we'll take a look at a video of the kind of feedback the therapist provides relating to this intrinsic reward.
That sounded gorgeous. Is that the voice you use when you talk to people?
Yes.
Good. And why do we want to use that big voice?
So people can hear me.
You are so smart.
All right, so we embed, why do we use this voice? What's the purpose of it? How does it feel? Isn't that great when someone understands you? One last thing I'll say before I pass it over to Jessica is that we also allow the child to, I guess, name their voice. So sometimes the cue is loudness. We're always focusing on healthy vocal loudness. So nothing that's ever a shout, a scream, too loud. It is about healthy vocal loudness they can stabilize. But we know that loud isn't always a cue that resonates with the child. And it's It's something that sometimes in school, for example, don't use your loud voice, use your inside voice. So it's more about naming the right amount of effort they use to have that good quality loudness. So some kids who, for example, are Disney fans, maybe it's their bell voice, their beautiful bell voice, or it may be their powerful voice. Some kids have named it, this is my confident voice. So we have an infinite number of things that the child can name their own voice. But what we're driving with that is this effort and healthy vocal loudness. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and she's going to walk through some of the how does this work? How does it really happen in the real world? So, Jessica, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. And while the strong foundation of research and theory that Cynthia was just speaking to and speaking about that is supporting LSVT Loud are so important, without implementation in the real world, all the time, the energy, and the money spent on the research don't really end up making a difference in the lives of the children that we serve. So in the next few slides, I'm going to discuss some survey feedback from clinicians throughout the United States and around the world who have implemented LSVT Loud with children and a variety of pediatric populations. And so I hope this gives us a chance to really understand what's working for clinicians, what challenges are arising, and how we can improve when we administer LSVT Loud in the pediatric population. So let's first start by looking at the types of diagnoses that have been successfully treated with LSVT Loud. And what we saw from the survey is that LSVT Loud is being applied to children with a wide variety of conditions, including those with dysarthrias due to cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, cerebellar ataxia, dysarthrias secondary to autism spectrum disorder and muscular dystrophy, those with cleft palate or repairs, those with no neurological diagnosis, but just a low pattern of vocal volume or speaking volume, those with traumatic brain injuries, difficulties with speech due to seizure disorder, global developmental delays, dual diagnoses of dysarthria and childhood apraxia of speech, and dysarthria secondary to fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So we're really seeing this applied to a wide variety of difficulties, disorder types, and children. So let's take a look now at what results clinicians are observing when they administer LSVT Loud with their kiddos. So the survey data are showing significant improvement in three key areas. And when you think about the first one, vocal loudness, we're not surprised. We're seeing very significant improvements in vocal volume following this treatment. It's the most consistently improved area, but it's also reflecting a nice improvement in speech motor breathing, the coordination between respiration and phonation, and respiratory kinematics. And then what I love seeing is that second set of bars or rows in the middle of the chart here. We see a nice improvement in speech clarity and intelligibility. And we note this, that as the children are getting louder, they're making more precise articulatory contacts. As a result, mouth is opening more, and we get a nice improvement of overall speech intelligibility. So less questions asking, what did they say? What was that? That many children and adults are really bothered by. And then very importantly, I think to all clinicians working with children is communication confidence. We're seeing that progress does vary in this area, but we're seeing nice significant improvements with communicative confidence as well. So it really shows us that LSVT Loud successfully targets loudness, but we've got this additional benefit profile or a spreading of effects to also influence how they're breathing, their speech clarity, and their overall confidence in communicating. So now let's talk a little bit about the unanticipated challenges that were reported through this survey. One being something that I think we're all not surprised by, some children having some difficulty with home exercise, homework, or carryover. But what I think as a person who does LSVT Loud for kids throughout my practice is that the way that you assign the homework, the way you assign carryover exercises within LSVT Loud really is kind of blended into that child's day-to-day life. So we're not burdening them with extra things to do and more stuff to do, a ton of work outside of their usual homework or extracurricular activities. We're really assigning a quickie exercise set that's only about 5 or 10 minutes outside of practice, and also involves carryover exercises that are just a part of what the child might say anyway during a day, but with a cue to increase loudness and really use the techniques or the strategies they learn in therapy in their day-to-day life outside of treatment. So within LSVT Loud, we're seeing a nice natural way to target homework and carryover. Though, of course, with kids, we always have to be on top of that to make sure that they have the support and the time they need to be able to perform it. We also had some reports of having some difficulty keeping younger children engaged. I know in my office, we are armed with all of the toys. And so one of our very successful children, she was about 4.5, who went through the program, did phenomenally well in the month. And it was really all about, using Pop-Up Pirate and a couple of very cute kind of turn-taking games to keep her having fun and have engaged while she was, or being engaged while she was doing those ahs and those highs and lows that Cynthia introduced you to earlier today. Sometimes, of course, we have to manage behavioral issues and cooperation difficulties in the same way we might need to address them in other pediatric sessions. And of course, being consistent with our data collection is important as well. And some clinicians who were likely a little bit new at applying this program to children may have had some challenges balancing data collection and being present for the client, many times in similar ways that we have to figure out how to balance a pediatric session and help make sure that we're exercising the kids with the frequency that we know will work from the research, which we have here in LSVT Loud, but that they're also having fun and enjoying the session, really feeling engaged as well. And what I've seen is that over time, as clinicians are using this program more and more often, that balance just becomes very natural. So these challenges do require some creative strategies and some strong family involvement, especially when there is the case of some difficulties using it at schools or when there are illnesses or absences that also come up very naturally. I don't think there's anything to really be concerned with here with regard to illnesses and absences. Again, like in any other pediatric therapy, we're really using our clinical judgment and seeing, where are the children in their course of therapy? How are they doing? Are they compliant with their homework and their carryover exercise? Are they starting to generalize this nice, louder voice and clearer speech into their functional environments? And if so, it's easy to miss a day and then tack on an additional day that following week in therapy. So there's all these different ways to maintain the gold standard fidelity of practice that we know is present and works within LSVT Loud, but we can also modify based on the pediatric population to be able to manage these illnesses or behavioral challenges that might come up. So lots of different ways to make it work. But working with kids, as we see from this picture, it can be unpredictable, and sometimes we just, wonder how we do it when we've got children who've got something going on or presenting with a behavioral difficulty. So here are some key strategies for managing these challenges. And what we've found to be one of the most important, and this if you're doing a lot of pediatric therapy, is flexibility. Really adapting adapting sessions based on the child's needs. And so if they're feeling a little fidgety, a little bit kind of jumpy that day, being able to get up and move around while doing the ahs, playing a game, throwing a basketball in the hoop, so many different ways you can be flexible, but still adhere to the gold standard intensive protocol that's really needed to see this progress be made in such a short period of time. And then, of course, being patient. Typically in this 4-week program, progress does, even though we do see more, I think, quicker results in a shorter period of time, the progress still does take time. Typically in the first week, we see this beautiful increase in progress, and weeks 2 and week 3, it gets harder. The sentences are longer, the reading or the structured conversation might be a little bit more challenging. And so it's very important during those times to keep motoring through, stay the course. Kids will make that progress and really see that functional carryover by the end of that month. And then, of course, managing distractions as they come up, really setting up the environment for success. And so if you're in a classroom and you typically do a push-in session, maybe figuring out if you can pull out for the first half of the session. Do those ahs, those highs and lows outside in a private office or quiet hallway. And then as you're targeting hierarchy, maybe bring it back into the classroom if it's okay to add distractions in that part of your therapy. So really being mindful about how to modify the environment to maximize success, both during the therapy sessions and outside of for the children that you're working with. And then, of course, focusing on intrinsic rewards. I think many times as pediatric clinicians, we get comfortable with giving stickers or little treats to extrinsically reinforce how the kids are doing because we're proud of them. But really making therapy engaging and fun and purposeful, this is the biggest win. I remember working with one of the 9-year-olds with cerebral palsy several years ago, and one of the most important outcomes from her or for her was being able to yell her brother's name and say stop it when he was teasing her or kind of running around and making her feel a little bit upset. And that power to be able to say, Dylan, stop it, and have him listen, that was all the intrinsic reward she needed. She felt so empowered, so confident, and then she was so much more excited to be able to use this louder voice in all of these speaking environments she was finding herself within. So if you're watching this as a family member or a care partner and you're not just a clinician joining us for today's webinar, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so many things going on. Or even if you're a clinician, you're thinking about the families that you work with. And it may not be just the parents or parent and the child with needs. They might have siblings. They have a lot of extracurricular activities. Who knows what can be going on? And so families face many challenges when they're committing to LSVT LOUD or any other therapy approach for their child. Some concerns that have been reported include difficulties with transportation to therapy sessions each day, just having really busy family schedules, as I just mentioned, having other kids, other siblings who need attention, maybe some school and work conflicts if the work hours that the parent holds is different from what is possible for school or after school sessions. And then, of course, your availability if you're a clinician and have a busy schedule. But by working with families to create structured, flexible treatment plans, we really can improve adherence to the therapy. And what I've seen is that when we plan in advance, really being mindful of all the different doctor's appointments, extracurriculars, evening events, PTA stuff, work-related things, you can, and your schedule as well, you can likely find a perfect month that will work, even if it is a few weeks out from the initial eval. And of course, being open to summer breaks, using those summer breaks for the intensive bouts of therapy can also be a really easy and great idea. And then, of course, we have telepractice. What's wonderful with LSVT Loud is that there is something called LSVT Loud. And so that is the administration of LSVT Loud for kids via an online platform like Zoom or something of the sort. And so many children, especially these days, are very successful in doing LSVT Loud online. This is a great photo of a little bit of an older boy who seems tech savvy and can just join the session on his own. But in my office, we've also had things come up in the schedule where the parent has requested an online session, and we were able to have the babysitter set them up. And for early school age, this was no problem as well. So really thinking about the telepractice trainings that LSVT Global offers, the wealth of research that looks at the use of LSVT Loud in the online format, still achieving the same outcomes we get if in that or with that face-to-face treatment, and familiarizing yourself with how to run an online session for this therapy are really great ideas if you're interested in really offering that blended in-person and online intensive format for kids. So let's take a look at a video now. This is of a parent commenting about the LSVT Loud treatment that her child received.
I also think doing the therapy via teletherapy, via the computer, was also really beneficial. Pearl loves screens, so working with Jennifer through the computer screen seemed to feel more like play to her. It seemed to make her actually, I think, more alert, not to mention making it much easier to schedule. I don't think we could have done the therapy if it weren't for being teletherapy. I don't think we could have made the scheduling happen. I also
All right. So that's really great evidence showing the convenience that telepractice can provide for many of these families. And then in school settings, thinking of how we can schedule and balance those academic demands that can feel like a major obstacle is so important. So there are many suggestions we have for making therapy in the school setting work. I know we can be limited by IEP mandates and trying to coordinate timing with teachers and administration. So just thinking about these suggestions and approaching your administration or teams with these options may really give you and the children a chance to do the intensive therapy even during the school day. So what I suggest is planning ahead with teachers to schedule those 16 face-to-face, one-on-one, 1-hour sessions for each session, and that can be Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday. Again, just the 1 month, involving educational assistants, teaching assistants, volunteers to really help the kids complete their home exercise program at a time different from your therapy time, but another time during the day. So taking 10 minutes to do that exercise with someone else, and also help to cue for or facilitate those very important carryover exercises, those very natural opportunities for the kids to have a chance to use this louder voice that feels a little bit unusual at first with a peer in the classroom or with a teacher, and have that success of being heard, being understood, not being asked to repeat themselves. That is going to facilitate that generalization that we're really looking for. So I love involving as many people as we can that the child is open to involving in the school setting to really facilitate that home exercise and that carryover. Then, of course, conferencing with teachers and parents and administrative staff can also be helpful to plan your treatment schedule, and also providing concrete examples of skills that will be improved after treatment. So really talking about the teachers, administration, and family about the expectations we have for the child to then be able to participate in the classroom more often, to be socially integrated with peers more easily, and to present in front of the class as needed. And then, of course, considering conducting portions of the session in the classroom, the lunchroom, the deck, the schoolyard, the roof, wherever it's feasible for those carryover activities or even homework when possible. Now, I've been talking about all these reported challenges and how we can problem solve and be creative, and different suggestions that we can use to handle those different challenges that arise. But there were also a lot of unanticipated benefits that people were reporting via the survey. So clinicians who administered LSVT Loud with kids observed improved posture. We see this and very commonly over the 4 weeks of therapy as children are taking those deeper breaths in and using that nice louder voice. Trunk control, posture, head position, all sometimes improve. What I also love is seeing improvements in language. And so though we're just targeting motor speech, during hierarchy activities, we can target language. And many times we've got school therapists contacting us after an intensive bout in private in LSVT Loud over the summer saying, wow, I'm seeing a really nice increase in mean length of utterance. They're initiating language much more. They're advocating for themselves. They're participating in conversations more often. So I'm really seeing this nice improvement in expressive language skills and also pragmatic communication. So it's really exciting to see, not that only that the kids are making improvements across these very specific treatment goals, but they're also having improvements in communication confidence and language production, and just advocating for themselves because they feel more confident and empowered. And then it's also fun to see how proud they are when they're graduating from that month of intensive work. So on this next slide, we can see that a really nice quote from a child who gained that confidence I just mentioned to read aloud in class despite background noise. Previously, they were avoiding speaking in noisy settings, and then after LSVT Loud, they were able to read aloud during class. So if you are a clinician and you're joining us joining us from the clinic, you're joining us as a clinician, or if you're a parent joining us for today's webinar, I want you to stay the course. You know, many times therapies for children aren't so intensive. They're once or twice a week for 20 or 30 minutes. It's really not enough to drive that change that we're looking for and that we see with this 1 month of intensive therapy. So it can be a little disconcerting or worrying in the beginning if you haven't had a child participate or you haven't brought a child through an intensive program. But these are some great quotes on the next couple of slides that really show how both parents and therapists jumped in, stayed the course, and had such success. This particular parent states, in the beginning of the program, I was really worried this program was not for Wes. I was worried that he was too young, had too hard of a time following directions, and generally too low cognitively to participate. Wes, Erica, and Jody worked so hard together to show that kids Wesley's age can do better with this type of intervention. Wesley learned the routine, the exercises, and eventually expected what was coming. So really nice words demonstrating the initial concerns, but ultimate success that her son received with both LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. And so then in this next slide, we hear from one of the LSVT Big therapists who actually treated Wes in his physical therapy program. Erica stated, the first day when he arrived with his family, I realized I was wholly unprepared. I had not treated a young child for movement deficits in my entire 22-year career as an occupational therapist. But this is an individual who is a specialist in LSVT Big administration for adults with various movement disorders. So she said she pulled out the LSVT Big functional tasks recording form that and had mom and dad give me a list of 10 things they wanted their son to be able to do. And with that list made, she then had to figure out how she was going to facilitate it. And though after the session she felt like a new grad and was somewhat initially overwhelmed or felt incapable or uncertain, she knew that she had parents that were so motivated and this treatment program that was grounded in such a wealth of research showing how effective it could be, not just for individuals with Parkinson's, but other children and adults with neurological disorders. So she knew she had to find a way to use what she knew about the potential of LSVT Big. And it was a great success. So if you are just starting out with this program, jump in. Know you've got all the supports available to you with LSVT Global and the clinical experts here to support. And definitely stay that course. And I know you're going to have that success. So to summarize, today's lecture. One, we have been on a serendipitous journey of LSVT LOUD from Parkinson's to pediatrics, and so stay tuned. We've understood that the treatment concepts really do make sense in this population, and so you're probably going to see a wealth of research in this area as well, not just applying this to cerebral palsy and Downs and autism, but a wide variety of speech motor and physical movement difficulties in pediatrics. We've got a growing evidence base to support application to select children at this time. And again, it's growing. And we can see that we can easily adapt exercises without losing the gold standard core ingredients for success. And so I wish you all the best of luck. I hope this has been an informative webinar and lecture for you today. And so we're going to break just for the next few minutes. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Here are some instructions about how to do so. You can either type your question and answer in the chat box within Zoom. You can raise your hand and we will unmute your mic and your camera if you'd like, so you can ask the question. And if you can't remember right now and something comes up later, don't hesitate to email us at webinars@lsvtglobal.com, just referencing this webinar and asking your question there, and then we'll respond by email. And then after you close out, or after we finish today's webinar, there will be a survey that's presented on your screen. You'll also be emailed this as well. For the live participants, it'll display on your screen just directly after the webinar, but also emailed to you tomorrow. And if you're watching this on demand, there is a survey link that can be found below the webinar description for each individual webinar in the on-demand webinars series section of blog.lsvtglobal.com or below the webinar description under the video in YouTube. You can also email webinars@lsvtglobal.com if you're having any difficulty finding that survey. And it is required to receive your certificate or continuing education unit. But it only takes a couple of minutes to complete, and we thank you in advance for completing it, because we do our best to make sure that we are responding to your requests and your inquiries and really getting you that content that's going to make a difference in your clinical practice. And then also we have launched a podcast, something called Think Big and Loud. So Think Big and Loud is all about sharing inspiring stories, expert insights, and engaging conversations, all designed to empower and uplift. We cover a wide range of topics, from the latest in therapy techniques to personal journeys of triumph and resilience. And so you can find this on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you so much for joining us. You'll see some more contact information here on this slide, and then we'll also point out that you can find out information about blogs and all the research that's been done to support LSVT LOUD and its application to pediatrics in the references list that's available online in your clinician account. Thank you so much. Cindy, you're still muted.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Jessica, for all that information. We are at the top of the hour, so if you need to log off, you have completed your requirements for CE activity, but Jessica and I are happy to stay here for a few minutes in case you have some specific questions that you'd like to ask. Just one quick reminder again, the survey won't appear until the email tomorrow because we didn't have time to get it uploaded in the link when you log off. So both the handouts with all the slides and the survey will come to you in that follow-up webinar. So Jessica, one quick question for you. Are there any key like contraindications of a case where you'd say, no, this is completely not appropriate for children?
That's a tough question because I have an answer for adults. There are a few disorder types for adults that we would not want to do the intensive exercise, whether it was LSVT LOUD or anything else with them. But for kids, it's really case specific. I haven't found a child who has been a candidate for LSVT LOUD and have it be contraindicated in some way. So I think that what I would suggest is first going to your rehab team and your physicians that the child sees, just letting them know, hey, this is an intensive therapy. It's 1 hour a day, 4 days a week. There's a little bit of exercise. Explain what's involved in the intensive exercise. We're not asking the kids to like pick up chairs and carry it across the room. It's not that level of intensity. They're just they're taking deep breaths in, they're saying, they're talking loudly. Many times it won't be contraindicated. And so I think any questions that come up, reach out to the docs, be specific, ask those questions to get that reassurance it's okay to move forward.
Great, thank you. And then I'll take the next question. So it's two-part. The first part is, how do you find therapists who can deliver LSVT LOUD? So on our website, lsvtglobal.com, there's a big button in the upper right-hand corner. It's orange, or some people say it's red, but it says Find LSVT Clinicians. So you can click that, click loud, and there's actually a sub search where you can click specifically for people who see pediatrics and have a pediatric specialty. And then the map will appear. You'll put in where you live, the map will appear, and you can locate clinicians. If for some reason you're searching and you can't find someone, you can also reach out to us. There are occasions where people are certified in your area, they just don't want their information public, but yet we can help you make that connection. Then the flip question is, I suddenly got it. Feedback.
Oh,
I don't know if you can hear that. How do I get to you? So how do I, speech language pathologist, learn LSVT LOUD? So we have an online LSVT LOUD is training and certification course that you can take. Information for that is also available on our website. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. And Jessica, I will hand that over to you. Have you ever used LSVT LOUD for autism spectrum disorder? And would there be contraindications there?
Yeah, I have actually. We were very successful in using LSVT LOUD for a person with autism spectrum disorder. It was challenging in different ways, but so rewarding. And there's a great case report that was published a few years ago on this particular case. And what I love about the report, it's very straightforward, it's extremely user-friendly, and it goes through a pre-treatment protocol. And so this was something that was so important because initially the child was not stimulable for the program. I did not think that it would be possible to move forward. But with some pre-treatment training and really getting the children or the child ready for the program, the intensity of it, what's involved, working with the behaviorist, the learning specialist, the other team members to really optimize participation, we were able to move forward. So I would strongly recommend taking a look at that case report to find out the details of how that worked, why we thought it might not work, but it really ultimately did work, and how we made that work.
Super.
Yeah.
And I know it is a really wonderful case study. So I highly recommend it. So with that, I think we will conclude our presentation. Thank you again for being here. And we're here if you have any additional questions that come up after the webinar. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.